Spectacular, isn't it? I don't know where you live, but I'll still hazard a guess and say that the view from your living room window isn't as breathtaking. And that's because we are in Ladakh, the most remote, the most inhospitable, but also the most beautiful part of our country. But what are we doing here? Well, a spectacular place like Ladakh deserves a truly spectacular test, a giant comparison test of all the small cars in the country. These tortuous and demanding roads are a true test of a car's abilities and capabilities, and the one car that can stand head and shoulders above all the others over this kind of terrain will truly emerge as the best small car in the country today.
Our destination was Ladakh, but our journey began 500 kilometers away in Chandigarh, where we took delivery of 9 of the best small cars available in India today. And what a selection! We had our car of the year, the Skoda Fabia, Hyundai's 1.1 litre i10, the i20 with a new diesel engine, Maruti's diesel Ritz, petrol Swift, and obviously the petrol A-Star. Fiat's Grande Punto and the Tata Indica Vista both sharing the same diesel engine, and the most expensive car in this bunch, the Honda Jazz. At 7 AM on day 1, 9 cars, 16 drivers and a ton of supplies were creatively thrown in, and the convoy hit the road. Sneaking out of Chandigarh through the light but constantly spitting rain. If you haven't been to Chandigarh, you really should. It gives an idea as to what a properly planned city can do. Traffic is very orderly, there are nice broad roads, roundabouts everywhere, nobody pushes and shoves all over the place. It's a good city if you're a driver. That's why a lot of these great rally drivers, racers have come from Chandigarh. But it's also to do with the fact that the mountains are very close, and that's where we are headed. Today we are going to Manali. The plan was to keep swapping cars so everybody could spend decent time in the cars and draw their own conclusions on these hatchbacks. Bert started by squeezing his not-so-small frame into the smallest car in this group.
And Bert is behind me in the start. Don't mind all those noises coming out because that's the radio working there and a lot of gibberish running to and fro. This is going to be a tough drive. These cars are stiffly sprung, they're not the most comfortable in the lot. The terrain we're going into is very hostile, it's very demanding, and I'm sure to lose a few pounds. So the next time you see me, you're going to see a leaner, meaner bird.
One thing we don't seem to realize, we don't talk too much about it either, is that small cars have grown so much over the past few years. Remember the 800? If you sat in an 800, you would be cramped. The steering wheel would be here, you'd have no headroom. Passengers at the back would have no space, there would be no space in the boot. It was a cheap and basic car. Small cars today aren't cheap and they aren't basic. Look at the Ritz, there's so much space in the car. The driving environment is very good. Look at the headroom, there's so much of headroom. It's an airy car, the dashboard feels nice, it feels solid, it feels well built. Shumi had grabbed his bags, cables, sweets, shades and tons of other rubbish he keeps carrying around and ran to the one car that could take his beloved iPod.
As you can see from this weird chocolate brown, strange brown color, I'm in the i20. And out of all the cars in the convoy, this is the car I picked today. Why? Well, this is a fully loaded car. It's got one of only 2 USB ports in this whole convoy, so I can plug in a memory stick and listen to good music. The other reason for picking this car is that this is probably one of the safest cars in the convoy by a huge margin. As you know, this is a 5-star rated Euro NCAP car. Only traction control is missing from the spec between the Euro NCAP and this. And I've got 2 airbags in front, I've got curtain airbags, so should the untoward happen, I should be good to go.
Nine cars sneaking in convoy, all stickered, lights blazing, will obviously draw stares. And getting out of Chandigarh, stairs were what we were pulling. But what was also pulling along very well was Fiat's acclaimed multi-jet diesel engine. The car that saved Fiat. That's the Grande Punto's calling, its claim to fame. And in India, it should hopefully mark yet another revival in Fiat's fortunes. So what is this car all about? Well, like all Italian cars, this is one gorgeous automobile. It turns heads like no other small car in the country today, and it is truly exquisitely styled. Being a Fiat, it also rides very well. You can fly over speed breakers, over broken roads, and the car takes it all in its stride. But crucially, it also has excellent handling. This car has the best ride and handling balance amongst all these small cars. Honestly. 80 kilometers into the drive, we hit the hills and halted for lunch at Bilaspur, midway between Chandigarh and Manali. It was time for another car swap, and I took an old favorite. Bilaspur is home to the massive ACC cement factory, and that means tons and tons of truck traffic, which is a nightmare to get past because the roads are narrow and winding. So when the roads finally open up, oh, you go berserk. The Swift is blessed with a sublime chassis. It's predictable, it's neutral, and it's communicative. You know what each wheel at each corner is up to. And the steering too is an absolute delight. What the Swift is not though is a good riding car. The ride quality is just about average on this car.
If you had to blindfold me and put me in this car, and if I didn't know any better, I could easily be mistaken that this, the i10, was a car made by Maruti Suzuki. Just goes to show how close the Koreans are getting to the Japanese. However, there still are two grouses that I have with this car. One of them, of course, is the gearbox, which feels terribly notchy as yet. And then the other is this steering wheel. There's just no feedback. It feels dead as a fish. I'm thinking about fish. I just can't wait to get to Manali, where I can have some of that awesome trout.
With a plate full of trout on Bert's mind, we made haste through the hills, and as we closed in on Manali, it was time for our last changeover. Bert found a car better suited to his size.
Jazz! Whoever thought of a corny name like that for this car? This isn't anything like that branch of music at all. This is heavy metal. Heavy metal in a velvet glove.
I meanwhile was in heavy metal. No velvet glove nonsense, just heavy metal. The ultimate small car comparison test should have the ultimate small car, which is of course the Nano. We thought about it and then we decided against it, especially considering what we're going to put these cars through. That's why we have the new Indica Vista. As light faded, we entered Manali, bringing day one of our drive to a satisfying end. But little did we know that day two was going to be a lot more interesting. It's day two of our very big, slightly inspired, the stupendously crazy small car comparison test. Today, we head from Manali across the Rohtang Pass and down to Jispa. Rohtang, in case you didn't know, actually means pile of dead bodies in Tibetan. The roads now are much better than the donkey trails back then, but for these small cars, it's going to be a torturous test of their abilities. Manali, as you can see, is bright, it's sunny, and it is extremely beautiful. So beautiful and the weather so good that half the crew wants to break the story here and head back to Delhi. But we've got a job to do and Rohtang beckons. Before that though, breakfast beckons. After lots of breakfast, we hit the road, stuffed, fat and happy. Jispa was only 140 kilometers away, the sun had finally come out, the weather was good and it should have all meant an easy jog. But never, ever, ever underestimate Rohtang.